Welcome to the monthly podcast, The Wealth of Generations. If you like to build true wealth for generations, this podcast is for you.
Yeah, tell me, Kristina, Wealth of Generations, what were you most intrigued about?
No, I think it's a really, really good book. I think it's the book that everybody should have when they leave school at the age of 18. It's a financial literacy book. And it teaches you about financial literacy, not only from the perspective of thinking about how am I going to make money, but actually the what kind of person do you need to be in order to be able to create wealth? Because wealth and assets are different things. And wealth and net worth are also different thing, as we know. And I think from a female perspective, I connected with the book because it's everybody kind of I kind of grew up being 6 years old, and I said I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then when I was 12, I said I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had no entrepreneurs in my family. But I had a very kind of encouraging father who was kind of really invested in my interests and my abilities and my creativity. So he kind of stimulated my creativity, and he's kind of, well, you go with you can do anything, literally. Your own inner limits is your only restriction. So I grew up with this ability to think, first of all, outside the box and being very creative, because my father was an inventor. And having parents who'd kind of taken a stance against normal life of gathering a lot of assets, but living a very rich life. We lived in an urban farm, grew most of our vegetables, spent a lot of time together as a family, surrounded by books, made most of things. We didn't buy a lot of stuff. My grandmother was a tailor, so of course I didn't buy any clothes. And my grandfather was a butcher. So the meat was either, shot and hunted and brought to the table. So I grew up in this kind of very arts and crafty space and place where you have to make everything yourself. So I grew up in this environment, thinking that, well, if I'm going to have to make money or make a living, I have to make it myself. So I wasn't brought up in a culture where you kind of have to buy things. So this whole idea of going out and buying things for me, so I actually know how to do everything. It's like from everything from making lace to making the broth, to making clothes, to making the pattern for the clothes, for making an igloo, for shifting the spark plugs, to growing vegetables. I just have this kind of skill sets which somehow kind of have been lost in society, this kind of artisan culture, this artisan skill set. And this skill set is kind of understanding that if you're going to make money, you have to make something yourself, not buy it. And then once you understand how to make it yourself, you can actually sell it to others and scale it.
But you cannot do everything yourself, right?
No, you can't do everything yourself. But that's the other thing. And I learned that from a very young age, because one of the first things my father asked me to do when I was about 6 years old, and this was kind of this transformative moment where he asked me to weed the dandelions out of the grass plane in our garden. And I just looked at this. I'm 6 years old. There's so many dandelions, but I could see that kind of end goal. I would get a pot of gold, which I can go to the shop and buy candy for. And I figured out, well, but I also want to play with my friends. So I kind of roped in every single friend in my neighborhood to actually do the dandelion picking. I weeded every single dandelion out of that, grass plane with my friends. And then I gave them a share of the kind of the returns of that we got.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I kind of understood, well, that's kind of what entrepreneurs do. That for me was the starting point of the entrepreneurial journey. To be able to achieve your goal, whether it's, for me that end, I want to go to the store, I want to buy some sweets, I want to save some money in my piggy bank, but I also want to share my returns with my friends. And if I actually do this with my friends, I can spend more time with my friends actually playing than if I was actually doing, something else. And this kind of triggered for me this kind of whole journey of the idea of being an entrepreneur in businesses, entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, and kind of impact investor. And it really changed the outlook of my life, and put me on a path of studying economics and business studies and social entrepreneurship, but also looking at what are the challenges in society and how can we use economic strategy or restorative economics or collaborative innovation to actually solve problems in society. So it's like, that's the challenge. How am I going to solve it? I can work with others to solve it. I find the solution and I share the returns in having the ability to find the solution and delivering the solution, and everybody benefits. So for me, that was kind of the transformative moment. And it turned me into a community developer. I became very interested in innovation. I became interested in identifying and articulating challenging, and then looking for ways to solve those challenges in a very collaborative manner. And studying innovation not from an R&D perspective in terms of this is what's happening inside the business and then we have to sell the idea to other people, but the idea is actually coming from the people, and then kind of switching the innovation pipeline so that the innovations and the ability to solve problems collectively actually happens outside the business, and then building the pipeline back into businesses to make them more innovation driven, but also grounded in the context which where they're in. And it put me on the path of looking for transforming businesses into being value and equity values driven in so many ways, because I could see that those businesses who were values driven, that had a more kind of diverse environment where problems were solved by more diverse people, they kind of did much, much better. So what was interesting about the book is the fact that you talk about the seven, there's the 7 levers of change, but here is kind of the 14 levers of change, and you have the 7, working on your internal stuff is just as important as working on the other stuff,
I mean, the investor levels.
Yeah, and the investor levels. So the inner, the heart and the mind need to be connected with, with yourself and who you are, because the investments that you make need to be meaningful for you, and it has to create meaning and meaningfulness in society as well. And I like the idea also when you talk about the legacy creation, because one of the things, once you have children, how do you pass on the notion of financial literacy? How do you pass on wealth from one generation to the next? And the fact that, you have to suspend your own kind of immediate need for satisfying your own needs to creating, to take this more long-term approach to creating something, that is that can benefit generations for, for 7 generations, not just yourself. And this is also the need for having this kind of, what is it that I really need?
Yeah.
And you don't need very much. Literally, you need very little in your day-to-day life. And the idea of, to meet your needs, having a vegetable garden, and having these passive assets that you can kind of draw upon, thinking about the fact that, you need to create wealth in terms of passive assets that can generate this kind of passive income, which frees up your mind to kind of do other things. Because when you're constantly working 14 hours a day, in ways in corporates, in organizations, which are kind of not run in a very sufficient manner. I mean, with the values you sometimes don't agree with, and governance framework, which is definitely not the way it should be, and with managers who kind of sometimes lack values and governing principles that you don't, abide by. And you get to a certain age in life and you have children, it's like, no. And I was kind of reading a book and I was like thinking, my God, do I identify with this? So that's what I liked about it, because it's like, well, it's my parents, my grandparents, this is my history, and I did all these things. I was working, I was a wage slave like everybody else, but I freed myself from the shackles of kind of being a wage slave, and
wage slave.
I started.
Word. Yeah.
And yeah, it was really, really interesting. And it's kind of then you get to that kind of point in life where you kind of the starting point where you kind of start on this journey of kind of wealth creation. And I came to that place, spot as well. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think it's very interesting. And I think it's very interesting for me being a woman as well, because as a woman, you're never taught uh, there's nothing in school that teaches you about wealth creation,
No,
whether
nothing,
it's the inner
right?
wealth or the financial wealth, or thinking about wealth creation in general, or wealth creation in partnership with other people. It's completely lost, and financial literacy
Mm.
is not even in our curriculum.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just not there.
Hmm.
And when I was thinking about it, we taught so many things, we taught English and French and math and all these kind of, very kind of not so useful skills. But of course they're
Hmm.
useful, but
For
it
nations,
doesn't.
for corporations, there. It's all for
Yeah,
corporations and nations.
yeah, corporations and nations, but this kind of financial personal literacy training,
Right.
which is about wealth creation, which is uh, taking a longer perspective, and also, the wealth creation, from a perspective of a family, talking about financial literacy with your children, and how they look at wealth creation, and how they look at, what do you want to spend your life doing.
Hmm.
And the fact that we're all put on this kind of path of, yeah, you're going to get a job, you're going to get a house, you're going to get a mortgage, you're going to work yourself to death. And then everybody's looking at, well, one day I will get retired and then I can live my life.
Yeah.
It's such a,
If you're lucky.
yeah, if you look it. And it's such the kind of the whole mythology of this.
Yeah.
I just feel like I've kind of broken every single boundary in my life that I could possibly break. From coming from a small village, and my parents kind of were kids and didn't go to university, didn't have the opportunity to go to university. They educated themselves, because of the war. My father became a naval officer and worked in as a minesweeper in the Second World War. My mother became a nurse.
Hmm.
My family kind of hosted people from the resistance movement in Denmark. My mother's brother fought in the resistance movement in Norway against the Germans. It's like that was there as well. So they educated themselves to the level that they could.
Hmm.
Um, I'm the first generation that kind of went to university. I'm the first generation that kind of traveled abroad. I ran businesses in the Middle East. I worked in
Hmm.
Saudi. I gave presentations with the minister of Pakistan on the importance of creating an innovation culture. I was with FIFA. I've been with Lego. I was with the
Yeah.
IOC. It's like,
Your UN involvement. You were at the UN.
yeah, and the United Nations, and doing all these things. But I think, we should have financial literacy should really be um, at the core of what we do as children, as we grow up as human beings, because how we invest our time and money is what's influencing the world to look the way it does today.
Yeah.
And if we don't invest our time and money in the right way, we're creating organizations which are harming the world more than they actually do good. And I know this is kind of a very philosophical level, but what you put your money into, the assets that asset allocation in terms of what you place your money in will influence your life and other people's lives, and the environment as well.
Yeah.
So
What do you think about the subtitle of the book, Building Wealth Without the Need for Skilled Labor?
yeah, I mean, I think it's spot on, because
It's spot on. Yeah. Is
yeah,
it too provocative, maybe?
no, because we are preparing ourselves for the whole kind of the implementation of the flexible firm model, where there's
Mhm.
going to be very few asset owners, and the whole idea that you have to be skilled to be to build businesses, or I mean, yeah, well, it's kind of, it's the idea that anybody can be an entrepreneur, anybody can be a social entrepreneur, and it's all about your determination, and it's about putting in the time, putting in the suspending the wealth that you kind of create today to have a better life tomorrow, and anybody can do that. So it's not about skilled labor, it's just about building your expertise or interest in one area. And in the future, because of AI and because of everything else, the traditional jobs that we see today, where we have the labor machinery kind of producing assets for a few, and as you rightly say, the assets doesn't flow downwards; it only flows upwards. So having the opportunity for each one of us to be our own wealth creators. Mm-hmm. And the drivers of our own futures and our own destinies. And I think, that needs to be the core. And the fact that this happens in communities of people who are, very similar to ourselves, and working in partnerships and collaborating. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about this book. It's kind of really hit the nail for me, Mm-hmm. Because it's such a personal journey. I kind of felt that I've been through that journey myself.
Wow, yeah. I didn't know that about you, but I noticed your interest in the book, and so it hit the nail for you on the head. Nice.
So so it's just something that it's, for me, it's the need to think about this from a much earlier age, to package this, to get people to understand it, to the whole idea about well-being also being, at the core of this. And if you're a good person, you do good business. And if your values are good, then how you invest your money and your capital is also going to generate, goodness, and I see that a lot as well, because I see a lot of investments, and I see a lot of, money flowing in different directions. But then I mostly work with private equity and family offices, and family offices is kind of very different from the, the venture vultures, as I call them. Mm-hmm. Which is all about, focusing on return investment, and, when can I get an exit, and maybe it's in 3 years. So family offices is an interesting, space, because they take a long-term stake. They look at 7 generations ahead, and the assets that they invest in needs to be, gel with their culture, their values, their governance principles and ethics and equity. And they kind of look at themselves as they're working on restoring society, and restoring values, and restoring some of the issues that the kind of the venture capitalists have created.
Well, family offices, what is that in your explanation?
Family office is somebody, it could be a single or a multiple family office, but it's usually like, you talk about asset classes, so it would be people who've set up businesses, first, second, third generation. Mm-hmm. Families have inherited it, and they have enough equity not only to kind of run the business, but also invest in other businesses. And what you find is that a lot of family offices invest in other businesses and develop assets, right, because they've been through certain challenges and frustrations in society, and now they suddenly see that the opportunity to give back to the community. Mm-hmm. So they are kind of looked upon as what you could say, basically, role models in society. So because they have excess capital to invest, people come to them and ask, would you like to invest in my business? So they move from being business owners to being impact investors. Because
offices, are they is that kind of a wealth management thing?
No. Yeah, well, it's not. It's kind of wealth management, but it's not like a fund manager. But they have their own internal funds, you could say, and these
family wealth management.
Yeah, it's family wealth. So it's the placement of family wealth, which does good to society. And they're very much interested in job creation, that's their focus, job creation, wealth, wellness, health, building healthy societies. So they take a completely different approach to investments and wealth creation.
You said wealth, you said job creation. What do you think of this idea or the prospect of that all jobs will be eliminated by, in the book it says 2060, starting 2060, or basically starting now, already started 30 years ago, but like is in the process of, do you think there is a chance, is that too provocative to say that all jobs are going to be eliminated by AI, robots, and blockchain?
No, well, it's kind of, I wouldn't say all jobs. I would say jobs which can easily be standardized, which is part of the old economy. I would probably say that, you're going to need even more consciousness, because what's missing with AI and the algorithms today is that they don't understand language. They understand language from a very restrictive grammatical perspective, where we kind of divide or look at language or our understanding of language by dividing language into very traditional lexical items such as nouns, adjectives, and pronouns and things like that. But the way so that's how I see the problem. Is kind of, that's why using banks, you use a lot of sentiment analyses. But the way language works is that it's understanding language from an argument perspective. And
but that's what GPT-3 does now. That's the whole. They developed this machine in California, which has 175 billion parameters, which is basically neurons in the brain. And people even say they develop consciousness. Now, the AI can develop consciousness. The question is when it's going to be proven that they did. It's hard to say.
But I think for me, the consciousness is understanding what is absent and filling that absent with the important that needs to be present, and then future-proofing the present by adding the absent, to build a future that is future-proof already today. And I know this is a very complex statement, and therefore for me, consciousness needs to be, for me, is defined by the absent. And the absent for me in the AI that we see today is everything to do with empathy and these kind of touch, feel.
Well, they don't have, AI will never have the experience a human has, growing up, being a child, having a body, that grows and all of that. They cannot, empathy means like you can kind of understand, meaning like have the same experience kind of. That will never happen. And that's the danger, because if AI becomes so capable, like GPT-3 writes essays already, GPT-3 Grammarly, it puts things in context and tells you, to restructure your sentence, because humans understand that better. And there, I mean, there are other applications which are just like mind-blowing right now. And you can even have a discussion with GPT-3, like almost like a person, and the person even jokes. I have seen videos they interview GPT-3 and the jokes about certain things.
I think so. But at the same time, I think we need the caretaking elements. It's going to be very difficult to outsource, like the touch and the feel. What we have with our hearing, what we have with our seeing and our senses, because that's going to take some time. I'm not saying that it will not come, but it will definitely take some time. And I think the humans, such as, you can have robot or, AI sophistication deliver the food to children, but the caretaking elements is cannot be.
But here's the distinction that I'm hopefully making in my book. There's a difference between AI replaces everything about humans. That's not what the question is. For me, the question is, how do people make a living? Like, are they selling the work that they do? Are they getting paid for it? like nurses, as you say, they have empathy and they need to, the touch is important, and the human connection, even like with nurses, with older people. But the question is, we have certain tasks that can be done automatically. And now all the people are like nurses. Let's say, nurses, there are all these technology inventions that can improve and lessen the work of a nurse, for example. But then the question is, at what point can a nurse, go to work and make enough money, have enough hours to spend to make enough money for themselves, right? I mean, the question is not like AI will definitely not become a human unless we merge with the technology. But the question is, can we make a living? Is it a job? Can we make a living selling our skills anymore? The question is AI replacing the jobs? And then, of course, they're not replacing them in that sense, but at least from a money-making perspective, there's other elements that humans add to the whole story, and that is going to, of course, that's going to go away, but humans are not going away. Humans are still here. The question is, how much money do they get what they do? Is that enough money to be able to support them financially and their families? And that's the concern I have in my book. And what are we going to do? A truck driver, for example, right? When the truck is driven on a highway by AI, let's say that's 80-90% a truck driver does, driving on a highway. But there's 20% where it drives into the lot and the exit and, and gas and, unloads and all of that. The question is, then we only have 20% of the work that's left for truck drivers. And, is there enough work that, all these truck drivers can have when there's only 20% work left out of all the, let's just say, hours of truck driving?
Thank you for listening to the Wealth of Generations podcast. This interview will be continued in the next part.